Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemophilepod.com. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Lynsey Addario has risked her life to capture the stark realities of war, from the Middle East and Afghanistan to Ukraine. From National Geographic documentary films and Academy Award-winning filmmakers Chai Vasarhelyi and Jimmy Chin comes Love+War. It chronicles Addario's ascent in the male-dominated world of conflict photography. In Love+War, we see a journalist willing to place her personal safety at risk in order to bring to us the stories behind the headlines, the stories of people caught in the crossfire of some of the most dangerous and brutal wars in the world, balancing her commitment to her craft while maintaining her commitment as a wife and a mother makes this film, Love+War, a very compelling watch. And we are honored to have back on the program one of our favorite guests, Chai Vasarhelyi, who, along with Jimmy Chin, directed Love+War, as well as the subject of the film that would be Lynsey Addario. To both of you, welcome to Cinemophile.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Lynsey Addario, I'd like to start with you because I think what you do is you're a journalist, you're a photojournalist, and I think in some ways human beings are programmed to the visual aspects of things. And I think what you do with your photography, capturing not only the moment, but often you're capturing the emotion, the setting, the horror, the terror of what is happening, or the humanity of what we see in your work. Let's talk a little bit about how you became a photojournalist. What was it that inspired you to pursue this as a career?
Wow, I've been photographing since I was quite young, about 12 years old, but I never wanted to be a photographer. I think because I was raised in such a creative, eccentric family, I fought against becoming a photographer. I was determined to do something more intellectual. But then when I graduated with international relations and Italian, the only thing I wanted to do was photograph. I moved to Argentina. I started becoming aware of pictures in the newspaper and telling stories through photographs, and I was particularly drawn to life overseas. And so I was making trips to Cuba in the 90s and was documenting sort of rising capitalism in Cuba. And then I moved to India in 2000, and there I really became aware of women's lives under the Taliban. And I was very curious about what they thought, what Afghan women thought about living under the Taliban. So I went and I started working there. And then the attacks of September 11th happened, and I had already made 3 very long trips to Afghanistan under the Taliban. And so I got my first big assignment to cover the fall of the Taliban in Afghanistan. And that sort of opened the doors, I would say, to the last 25 years. I then covered the war in Iraq and then Darfur and Congo, and it went on from there. But I think Afghanistan was really it was really curiosity that brought me into a hostile country, I would say. There was not active combat going on at that time, but it was certainly a country that had been decimated by already at that point 20 years of war.
What a story Afghanistan has been over the last century or so. As I said to you, Chai, last time we spoke, I was jokingly saying that you have your radar system out there around the world, picking up signals from potential stories and potential subjects. At what point did you land on doing something with Lynsey?
Well, I think Lynsey's like a legacy blue chip project, right? The question is, at what point did Lynsey decide to say yes to us? I think many people have tried to want to tell her story, either in fiction or nonfiction. And I think it was a confluence of things. One, that the timing is right in that journalism is under attack, and a free press is the foundation for a democratic society. And what Lynsey's story demonstrates full well in a very visceral way is the importance of bearing witness. And there's a human being behind every one of those photographs who's put themselves in harm's way and who's paying the price for bearing witness. And I think likewise too, like that my daughter's reproductive rights she has less of them than I did when I was her age. And here is also another great example of the power of a woman. And so, we were lucky Lynsey said yes. It wasn't a question whether we wanted to make the film. It was just, and it was interesting because like Nat Geo, normally I have to walk all studios into the film we want to make and try to demonstrate how we want to do it. And it was a very simple conversation with Carolyn Bernstein. She was like, of course.
That's fantastic. Well, it's easy to see why the end product is such as it is, that it came out great. Lynsey, when you were approached, trepidations, kind of, ground rules, just what were you thinking as you were moving into this?
I had been approached before by different people, and it was often when I was like in the middle of my memoir had been optioned for a fictional version. So that kept kind of first it was Warner Brothers, and then it was Steven Spielberg, and then Ridley Scott, and then it was, Paramount Viacom, and it sort of had many iterations, and they kept falling apart. And everyone always warned me, Hollywood, it'll take forever. And then with the documentary, I just felt like it was time for the focus to be on a woman, really. I had great respect for the films that Jimmy and Chai had made. And it was, as Chai said, the timing was right with the war in Ukraine. And it just felt like it was the right time to come together. And that even if the fictional version was not coming to fruition, the documentary would be something that would sort of hold true, and that would be the reality of my life. There have been so many depictions of war photographers over time, and I just felt like I was ready to go there. I was ready to open up. I had nothing to prove anymore. I've been through so many near-death experiences with two kidnappings and a car accident and ambushes, and I felt like the time was right.
There's so much in the film that it is just to what you're saying, the harrowing nature of what you do in general, but specific to your own life is just pretty remarkable. Chai, you lean into the other side of her life, not the professional side, but the personal side, which is revelatory for a lot of reasons, a lot of relatable reasons. The professional kind of the conflict that can often happen in a professional career in terms of family and the accommodations that need to be made. How big a footprint were you putting in that part of the story in order to tell it?
Well, it seemed essential, and I don't think they're separate. I think that's the point, is like that Lynsey, be it her, her background of growing up the daughter of two hairdressers in Westport, Connecticut, and her amazing sisters and this big loving family that's also complicated, to her very special relationship with Paul, her husband. Like there's a humanness that informs every image she takes. And I don't know, it just seems a disservice not to lean into that. And that there is a very real price to the type of work she does in the field. And the truth is, like, the work is for all of us. Like when Lynsey bears witness, like there's an individual in a war zone who's taking a photograph, and that photograph is telling the truth to benefit all of us as a community, as a society. And somehow, like, bringing to life that price and the struggle that it really is, seemed like it would be a disservice not to do that, because that is what Lynsey carries. So how we did it was very lucky. We worked with Thorsten Thilo, who's a wonderful one-man band cinematographer, and he ingratiates himself in a community. And I think that also it was just because Lynsey's a journalist, she understood the importance of the intimacy in telling a story, and also the importance of committing to doing that. And as did Paul, her husband, and they very graciously welcomed us in. And it was really hard. Like, it was hard for me to work with that material because I saw my kids in every frame, and they are much more clear in their dialogue about it than Jimmy and I am. Every film, its form is informed by its subject matter, and this was the way to tell Lynsey's story.
Yeah. There's one particular story that you, in some sense, broke, Lynsey, that was particularly resonant to me, and that the story of the woman who gave birth, who had twins, right, and died in childbirth. For most Americans, Africa is the other side of the moon. To sit down and read a story about the rate of miscarriage, the rate of maternal death would be beyond the pale. Most newspapers wouldn't even run a story, but your photo captured the essence of what was happening and caught on. I can't imagine, just as a professional, but also as a human being, what that means for you to be able to call upon your skill and bring that kind of attention to something like that.
I mean, it's what we only hope for, right? Is
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that a story we do can move the dial at all, I think, or can resonate with people, especially back in the US where we're so geographically removed from the rest of the world. And I think that I definitely didn't break the story. I mean, there were some amazing women photographers doing story on maternal death before me, like Carol Guzzi, for example, who's extraordinary. But I think that when I won the MacArthur Fellowship, when I was named a MacArthur Fellow, I wanted to sort of focus on a topic that was important to me as a woman and something that resonated with me. Much like when Chai picks a subject, she has to really care about it. It's the same for me because I'm sort of embedding myself in the world of my subject. And so I looked at maternal death, and the Mama Cisse story was ironically the first story I did on maternal mortality, and a woman died in front of me. And it's like, what are the odds of that, And I was so sort of stunned by that I really, childbirth is something we all take for granted. Everyone thinks, oh, well, women have been giving birth since the beginning of time. Of course it's safe. And so I had a real learning curve, not only on the Mama Cisse story, but on the other maternal death stories I've done since then. But the fact that it resonated with the readers and with Merck, the pharmaceutical company, and that they used that spread in their board meeting with corporate responsibility, where they were discussing how to use their funds, and that it ultimately ended up influencing their decision to start Merck for Mothers, was something that I could only dream of, and I would never have known about that had I not gotten a call from one of the board members who told me that. I mean, why would I think that my story would impact impact the creation of Merck for Mothers? And it was only upon getting that information a year later did I learn that.
Yeah, and what I was struck by, I remember I have some recollection of this story coming out because it was around that time the stories were starting to come out about rural maternal death rates in the United States started to become something that was being discussed in the rural parts of this country, especially if you're African American, you're much more likely to die in childbirth than anyone else. And so those are the kind of things that is, yeah, moving that needle to that point is, yeah, pretty remarkable. I just want to quickly remind our listeners that we're speaking with one of the co-directors, that would be Chai Vasarhelyi, along Jimmy Chen, and the subject of this film, Love and War, Lynsey Addario, and it is coming out, if you're in New York, on October 29th. Not sure what theaters, and it's also coming out here in Los Angeles on October 31st, so Halloween night, and will eventually end up being played on National Geographic Linear and Disney Plus and Hulu. So be looking for it. And with the pedigree of the filmmaking that we have here joining us today, I'm so happy that you have lent your gravitas to this subject and to Lynsey's life. Well, my congratulations to both of you. I always look forward to our conversations. And Lynsey, continue your great work, continue what you've been doing and so effectively and so with such dedication, and stay safe, please.
So much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.